Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy attacks with Heliod, Sun-Crowned, and 2 Nykthos Paragons. She uses Heliod to give both Paragons lifelink. What happens? Alright, so the first thing we're going to need to know in order to answer this question is that when a triggered ability triggers whenever you gain life, that actually means whenever a source causes you to gain life. That's important to know because here we have 2 different sources of 2 different creatures with lifelink that are causing you to gain life. That means that each of these triggered abilities is going to trigger 2 times, once for each instance of life gain. In other words, once for Nykthos Paragon number 1 causing you to gain life, and another time for Nykthos Paragon number 2 causing you to gain life. So that's pretty cool. Of course, the Nykthos Paragon abilities is a little bit less cool that they trigger twice. After all, the ability says do this only once per turn. Now, when you see that only means you do it once per turn per ability. Since there's 2 different Nykthos Paragons with 2 different instances of this ability, each instance of this ability, in other words, each Nykthos Paragon's ability, is going to be able to be used once per turn. So, you can use Nykthos Paragon number 1 to give all your creatures a buff, and you can use Nykthos Paragon number 2 to give all your creatures a buff. You just can't use either Nykthos Paragon 1 twice or Nykthos Paragon 2 twice. You can only use 1 time each turn per ability. Kind of confusing, but hopefully that explanation made sense. Now, the other ability is from Heliod Sun-Crowned, and this one doesn't have any sort of restrictions on it. It just triggers anytime you gain life. So Heliod will give you 2 different triggers, which means you'll be able to put +1/+1 counters on 2 different target creatures. You could choose the same target both times, or not, because it's 2 different instances of this ability triggering, you don't have to choose the same one. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that all the combat damage gets dealt at the same time, barring any sort of first strike or double strike shenanigans. That means that unless you have some way to give something first strike or double strike, there's no way to get any additional combat damage out of any of these +1/+1 counters that you're giving your creatures this turn. Next turn, of course, your opponent's probably going to be in for a really big world of hurt. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about how stuff like whenever a source causes you to gain life would work in some other types of situations. Let's say, for example, that one of our Nykthos Paragons had both lifelink and trample, and it was going to trample 2 damage onto a grizzly bear and the rest onto the grizzly bear's controller. What do you think? Would that be 1 instance of gaining life or 2? It turns out that even though all of the combat damage isn't being dealt to the same thing, you're still only going to gain life 1 time. That's because all of the combat damage gets dealt at the same time, and the source is the same source. That means that the game isn't going to see Nykthos Paragon deals 2 damage to grizzly bears as a separate event from Nykthos Paragon deals the rest of its damage to the controller. All that damage is going to get dealt at the same time by the same object, so it only counts as 1 damage dealing event, and therefore only 1 instance of a source causing you to gain life. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.